This is Naoki Yoshida,
This is Fern Hall.
and you are listening to Aetheryte Radio.
Aetheryte Radio.
Here we go.
Hello
funny.
and welcome to Aetheryte Radio again. No technical difficulties whatsoever.
Nope.
Kicking this episode off today.
Nothing happened. Nothing bad
No,
happened. We're fine.
nothing. Everything was fine. No, nothing to see here. All right. We are the Gamerscape Final Fantasy XIV podcast. I'm Fusion X. Joining me today, we've got Zadindra, Aldino, Rook, and joining us, we have Beyaca and Sly.
Hello, hello.
Hi.
Hello, everybody.
What's up?
So, before we get into our topic for today, two quick bits of news here. The Dragon Quest X event will be returning on July 2nd. So if you didn't catch that the first time around, you have another opportunity to get your Puff Puff on and to get your, what was it? There was the slime earrings, the slime hat, and then there was the mask. I don't know what that was called.
Does anything matter beyond the hat? Because I'm pretty sure the hat's the only reason that you do the event.
It's physics.
Right,
It's slime physics too. It'll jiggle around. I mean, that's what more do you need? So there you go. You have a chance to catch that again. Also, Yoshida did a stream Friday, Saturday, like last week, talking about that there's probably going to be a letter from the producer in early July. For those of you with a calendar, that's coming up pretty soon. So either next week, next episode, or like the week after that, we'll probably be getting some information. This is not a live letter, but I don't know how long it's going to be. If it's just going to be like all the presentation slides just dumped into a forum post. If there's going to be a patch, I would assume a patch trailer.
Right.
Unless things are delayed more, which maybe you never know.
They sounded like they were working at a pretty good pace.
It sounded like they were on track for what they told us. Yeah. So so we'll see. So keep an eye out for that. This week.
Speaking of calendars, I still have my 2 years ago FanFest calendar on the wall.
Yep.
I really need a new one, SE, if you would like to supply.
Right, give us a new
I
calendar.
have one of those from the 2014.
Yeah.
People
FanFest, I
get
think?
confused. They're like,
Did I get one?
the dates on this month are wrong. And I'm like, it's because it's a really old ass calendar. It's just
One day it'll be current again.
Oh,
There's
one
a
day it'll
reason.
come back around.
Yeah. It'll be right if you take a time machine.
Yeah. And hey, if we can't have in-person FanFest this year, maybe a little bonus reward. They just send us all calendars because I'd be super down with that.
How weird would that be?
Yeah.
Sorry, we can't have FanFest this year. They just send every paying subscriber a calendar.
But
here's
would
the
be really
calendar.
good
Like,
if they do that and they just sneak in the date for the new FanFest
Right.
in there. Would
Oh,
that be
that
cute?
would be so cute. That'd be so good. Square Enix, do that.
There you go. I don't have any
And
room
then
on
it
my
changes.
walls for a wall calendar, though. I don't have any room on my
You?
desk for a desk calendar. Like, this is
Just
really
dump a
rough.
couple Funkos out the window, and then where the Funkos were, put the calendar.
that face.
That's the
Your
saddest face I've
face.
ever seen him make.
Why would you?
I
Why would you tell
literally-
me to do that?
I have never seen that expression on your face.
That
before.
having been said, I am genuinely a little upset that I do have some new stacks building in front of some autograph posters, but that's another topic for another time.
Different problem.
Yeah. So, this week, this is an episode. This is a topic we've wanted to talk a little bit about for a while now. People of color in the Final Fantasy XIV community, as well as talking a little bit about everything that's going on right now with Black Lives Matter. And so we're really, really thankful that we have B and Sly joining us today to talk about this. So we'll just kick this off here. As a person of color, how have your experiences been in game with other players? Have what kind of issues have you faced? What kind of positive things have you encountered?
And just to clarify, are we talking about things that we feel like will relate to like some sort of like racially charged issues, or is just
Yeah.
negative experiences in general?
Everything, just Yeah.
It's kind of like how
Relatively speaking, this community, I've not had as many negative experiences, especially in comparison to other games. But I mean, I think if you play a game enough, you're bound to encounter some kind of negative experience in one way or another, whether it be something that's, related to like racism or whether it's not. But I will say, for the most part, as far as racism go, I haven't had many experiences. I actually thought about that for a while, like wrecking my brain, like, have I endured any kind of racism in this community? And to my knowledge, it was on a very minimal scale. And the only thing that really comes to mind is, I guess I wouldn't call this racist, but it just kind of made me feel a bit offended when, I've been in different raid groups, and I've even had friends mention this something similar, but they'll always say, well, you don't act like a normal Black girl, or you carry yourself really nice for a Black woman. And while that might seem like a compliment to someone who's not a person of color, is not a compliment to someone who's on the receiving end of that. So I think that's probably the worst on my end as far as something that would be considered that would be related to racism. But most of my experience in this game has been relatively positive.
How about you, Sly?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same for me because again, 14 really was my first real foray into the MMO. And like, I guess years before 14, I was like, when I was in college and, onward, I was big into FPSs and the shooty shoots. And they they do have communities, and it's really prevalent there. Like, you pick any day, and you'll probably like face some kind of racial issue.
Yep.
But here, I'm like, I had to really think about it. When I looked at this question, I'm like, have I?
Me too.
And no,
Me too.
no, I really haven't. I really haven't in game at all. And I guess that's due to the community, like being so tight knit, so close, like so close and so tight knit. Whereas the only real issues we have to face in 14 is like elitism and
Right.
rating and bullshit like that. And I would
Right.
take that any damn day of the week. I wouldn't want to, but I would take that any damn day of the week over racism. So
Yep.
yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That really says something about a community, in my opinion.
Yeah. I would say just like Bay, I mean, like, the only thing that I really encounter, and it happens all the time in every MMO, everything that has voice comms, you don't sound Black, right? That that sort of thing. I don't really know how to do that, so it's less prevalent here. I mean, I've only really raided with friends who know me, so. But every once in a while, when I'm in other games, I've seen it, but not in 14. I don't know that I would. It doesn't usually ever come up either. I agree with the both of you. Yeah, in game I haven't seen much, which is great. It's good.
It is interesting because your point about shooters, it's funny because while I can't relate, on like a racial sort of,
sure.
basis, as a female player, it was always baffling to me, like when you'd enter in and you'd hear something like that, and then it would be like this whole slew of every other minority group in adjacency to any other thing, where you're sitting there like, why is this happening right now? Like,
Yep.
why are we spending so much time in this match or like in Overwatch or in whatever talking about the ways in which minority groups shouldn't be playing the game when you should just play the game, like just play the game yourself. And whatever that was, I mean, it was such a stressful thing, just on that level for me as a player. But it has been nice, I think, in 14, at least from my experience as well. It has seemed to be a much more open community, and it really is heartening to hear that, like, the experience that you've all had as well is not like would you like me to list 5,000 cases of every single thing that happens every day?
Yeah.
It's harder to think of, which I think speaks well of the community overall, just hearing that.
I agree.
I know. Comms on shooters have always been terrible, right?
Toxic.
It's oh my god, a girl, or it's people talking about having relations with my mom, like, and they sound like they're 12 years old.
Yeah.
What do you think makes 14 better in that regard? Is there anything that stands out as being, is it the audience? Is it the content of the game itself? Is it how disputes are handled by Square Enix if they arise? What is it that helps?
I think
go
go
ahead. Go ahead.
I think the way that the producers, that the GMs, I think the way the game is handled in general by the people who run the game, I don't know what you call them, but I think that kind of sets the tone for the community and how we are to handle and address each other. For one, I think the biggest example I can really state to really get my point across is people always say WoW is toxic. I never play WoW, I don't know WoW, but that's just always what I hear. And the one thing I always ask on my streams is, why do y'all consider WoW so toxic? Like, is it just the players? Is it just the raiding community? Like, is it the hardcore? Like, what exactly is so toxic? And they always say that it's because you can do whatever on WoW, you can say whatever, and you basically reap no repercussions. You can file a report, but no one pays attention to it. As opposed to in 14's community, if you use profanity, I mean, say anything, such as like the N-bomb, the F-bomb, whatever, you report and you get some kind of consequence as a result. So I think that more or less sets the tone of how people should conduct themselves. Not to say that makes everyone really good, but I think it kind of more or less keeps people in check and of a certain demeanor. That's just my personal take on it, though.
So WoW kind of mirrors the whole FPS lobby deal where nobody's there to tell people to knock it off.
Right.
And then kind of piggyback on what B is saying. You have GMs, you have the producer who set these rules, and I feel like the community itself does a really good job of policing itself.
Yeah, I agree.
And you never really notice it until things actually happen, and you see it happen in game, and then you see it happen in social media and everything, and the community will do a really good job of policing itself. Another thing we can attribute to, I guess, is, like you said, the audience. Shooters have a really wide range in terms of its audience, and then I feel like our audience is a bit more mature, I'd say.
I agree. Yeah,
a bit on the older side. So yeah, I'd say that attributes to it as well. I think really that's it. I think those are the main things that attribute to us as a wholesome quote unquote community.
Someone in chat mentioned because it is pay to play, there's that barrier of people who actually probably have a job and are more mature can hop in.
Well, and I think in that regard too, it's a higher barrier to entry because it's a monthly fee. You still do have to pay for things like Xbox Live and PlayStation Plus, and that kind of thing too. So, but yeah, I think a parent is more willing to shell out $60 a year than 12 or $13 a month.
Yeah, the stakes are higher for bad behavior here.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It's kind of a shame though that the stakes have to be higher to make people not be assholes.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's kind of like the idea of investing in your community to some degree, if that makes sense. Like, if you have an investment in not just like the game itself, but also the community and the social elements and all these different things in a game, and that can start monetarily, which is kind of weird because if you have to pay $12 a month, you don't want to end up banned because you've been paying all this money in this game for ages, But then it trickles down across the board. And even when we were doing our Pride episode, we were talking about, just how I think there is like a big and active community in 14, and how within that community, people, like you were saying, Sly, tend to almost hold themselves accountable in a way. And sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. Sometimes people are losing their minds about something completely inconsequential. But at the same time, I think we set the tone for what we expect from a community in the game. And when players are setting that tone as saying, I'm invested in this and I care about it being a positive and welcoming space, then if that's the majority, people will follow it. which is really interesting to see, even as like WoW players come into 14, which I'm sure you've experienced, like hearing them say like, oh, it's so nice here. People say hi in dungeons. And you're like,
I hear that a lot too.
Yep.
Common courtesy, what?
What? Are we the Stepford of the MMO community?
Jesus.
Like, people come here, it's so nice. They offered me banana bread and I just got here.
I mean, every time I jump back into WoW and I do some of the stuff that I do in 14, you know, like say hi, or, you know, when something goes wrong, I'm like, oh, it's no problem. Like, I'm the only one who says something. Everyone's like, wait, what? We can chat here? Okay. You know, like, it's just weird.
Well, you can't chat in PvP. Hold on. Let me just say that. You can't chat in PvP.
Right.
We lost that privilege.
So there's some
we are
places.
A little bit bad. Yeah. We're not perfect.
The next thing we want to talk about too, with the both in game and real life things that are happening, are there what kind of parallels have you seen between the two? And do you think when you look at in game and then real life, is there also a difference then as a content creator and a streamer? Is there, you know, obviously as a streamer you have your own community, and if people are saying stuff you don't want them to say, they're there, right? But you can still get some people that are coming in and saying stuff as well. So how does that all kind of compare with each other?
Can I go first on this?
Please.
All right, this is a big one for me because this is something I've experienced literally all of my life. So I'm gonna just give y'all a little tiddler on my life story, and then it's gonna make sense when I make my point. So I've been a competitive volleyball player since I was maybe 8. I had a full volleyball scholarship in college. And the reason why that's important is because anyone who knows anything about volleyball knows that volleyball is a sport that's predominantly white folks, just being honest. And a lot of times when you are on a team as a Black person, you're typically like that token Black person, so to speak. Like you are really good. Usually you don't end up on volleyball teams if you're not very good. So it is not about performance. I'm making a point to say, like, I've been around a lot of people most of my life who were not people of color. And for a large amount of time, we traveled together, we stayed in hotels together, we basically lived together. And the one thing that I learned over time is that they tend to not respect you as much if they deem you as ratchet or ghetto. And so to their standards. So like you have to, I'm gonna say you have to, I've learned to literally, okay, I'm gonna backtrack a little bit. I'm from the hood and I know how to be hood when it's time to be hood, but I learned that around my white friends, I couldn't display that side of me. And what I'm speaking to is more or less like levels of censorship that a lot of us Black people feel like we have to take on in order to coexist in communities where people of color are the minorities. So relating that to Final Fantasy XIV, that's a big one for me as a streamer. And offline and IRL, they're very similar to me. Like one of the biggest examples I can give is, you know, a lot of my friends, and this is just the nature of the world we live in, you know, drop the N-bomb casually, you know, other Black people, and that's fine. But like one thing I feel really uncomfortable with is those people in my stream dropping N-bombs in my chat, because I know I live in a community that's not predominantly people of color. So it's difficult because it makes me uncomfortable. It makes me feel like I'm gonna make these people uncomfortable to where they won't show up to my streams. On top of that, I feel like I can't play rap music, and I grew up listening to rap. I'm not saying that's all I have to listen to, but there's days where I'm just like, you know what, Lil Wayne is what I want to listen to today. I don't feel like I can listen to that on my stream because people that play Final Fantasy don't want to hear that. So one of the biggest things for me as a streamer is really I have to play the right music. If I don't play music that's aesthetically pleasing to this community's ears, I won't have a viewership. That's what I feel like. I literally feel like that every day. If I don't present myself in a certain way, if you talk to a Black person, every Black person will tell you they have a work version of themselves where they have to like, there's like a persona, like a more filtered version of you, I would say, a better version, professional version. That's the version I feel like I have to put on as a streamer in the Final Fantasy XIV community. I feel like I I can be myself only to an extent, because me being 100%, you know, who I am is it feels like it's not accepted, and it feels like it won't be accepted in this community, because it's not what most of the community can relate to, and it's not what they're accustomed to. That's me being really honest. So when you ask, are there parallels, are there similarities between being a streamer and offline? For me, yes, major censorship that we have to take on IRL. I used to work in corporate America. I have to take that on IRL, in the same way I have to take that on here in this community. When I stream other games, I don't feel that way. So that's about the gist of it for me. I hope that didn't sound sad. I get really passionate. So like,
no,
yeah. So
that was amazing to hear. Like, honestly,
Yeah.
I was just thinking through everything you said mostly.
What you're saying right now is one of the reasons why I don't stream. Like, I am on this podcast, and that's it. I don't stream. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to have to. I mean, I feel as though, you know, you have to put on that persona. You're right. It does feel that way. And for me, I mean, that's what I do every day. You know, I work, you know, just like you said, corporate America, but I don't want to have to do that when I'm playing video games. You know, like, I don't want to do that. So I just don't.
Well, kind of go back to my youth, as B did. When I was younger, I lived I kind of lived with my mom first, because my parents were divorced, and her town was like in like the boondocks of North Carolina. It was predominantly white. You didn't see a lot of us, and like there, I really didn't feel like I fit in with the white kids or the black kids. Like, I was kind of like my own thing. And then fast forward to about like sophomore year of high school, who then my dad moved to Durham, predominantly black high school, everything. Still didn't feel like I fit in. Like, I was just, again, my own thing. I was me. I let my freak flag fly, like, ever since, like, what, probably 1986 when I was 2. But yeah, and it kind of took, like, for me, it took a little bit of, you know, soul searching within me to kind of discover, like, hey, you don't really have to put yourself into one category. Like, and shout out to X Mirror. She, like, I use this statement a lot now. Black is not a monolith. Being black is not a monolith. There's like there's no one set type of black person. And like, I live that pretty much every day. Like, I am the weirdest person. I am the most country black person you will probably ever find. Like, my mom, my dad taught me well when I was younger. My mom taught me to cook. I'm probably old man, old grandma black person. You see me, hey baby, you want something to drink? You hungry? Did you eat yet? Like, that's me. That's me. Hell, you saw me at the, what was it? The 20. When was the Fan Fest in the Rio? Was it 2016?
I think so.
It would have been.
If you saw me,
yeah.
If you saw me at the Rio, and like it was the first day of the Rio, if you saw me, I probably offered you a drink. That's me.
Actually, 2016, I think, was Paris. 2014 and 2018 were Rio.
Oh, no. Yeah, you're right. It was the Paris. Yeah, it was the Paris.
We said the 1 year that it wasn't at the Rio.
Yeah. So for me, like, even at work, like, there's, you know, work me. There's like half work me, half real me, because I actually have to be nice.
Right.
On stream, and the way I set like my personality on stream is, I didn't want to, you know, have another persona. I just wanted to be me. I wanted you to feel like you're at home. Are you hungry? Do you want to drink? Do you just want to relax? Come on in. And as far as like the music, if you're trying to get me to change music, you are fighting a losing battle. I'm sorry. I listen to pretty much whatever I want. It can go. It has gone, even on 14. It has gone from like days where we did 80s days, 70s days, 90s hip hop and R&B. I didn't care. Now I run a city pop radio station. Like, again, I am really eclectic. So for me, I really feel like I just live by, do you, boo boo. That's what I say. Do you, boo boo. Don't let anyone, like, don't feel like you have to censor yourself. Like, just be you. Again, are you hungry? You want something to drink? I'm just saying. So that's just me. Like, that's my kind of parallel.
Yeah.
But do you feel like you had to be like get to a level where you were comfortable with yourself and also just 100% fearless to be able to put that out there?
You talking to Sly?
All of you.
I think college did that for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like when I got to my freshman year of college, I really didn't have a lot of friends. I just stuck to my room, studied, played video games when I ever had time, and then went to class. That was it. That was the cycle. And it wasn't until maybe sophomore year that I kind of opened up. And I realized, like, I don't have to kind of be the wallflower. I don't have to be shy. Just like, don't be afraid of being you.
Right.
And that's what kind of helped me open up. And ever since then, it's kind of been that way.
It's the same for me. I've lived a bit, and I've had a lot of major life experiences. I feel like I'm very comfortable with myself, but as a streamer, I feel like it's really difficult to be 100% myself. And like IRL, I'm who I am unapologetically. But I remember when I first started streaming, I was who I am unapologetically, and I could tell, by certain interactions that, like, who I was, it wasn't what's the word I want to use? For whatever reason, it just felt like it didn't mesh with the community. And I'm a little bit more rough on the ends than you, Sly. Like, people call me country, my accent, I'm like, like, let's go do this, like, I talk like that. So, like, people have on one spectrum don't understand what I'm saying, and the people that do can't relate to what I'm saying, like, and I'm like you in the sense to where, like, I'm too white for I'm too white for the black people, and I'm too black for the white people. So it's just like, it's really hard for me in this space to really find a space where I'm like, you know what, as a streamer, like, I'm okay with this, and I feel like they're okay with this. I don't know if I'll ever get to that point. Trust me, I want to be there as a Final Fantasy XIV streamer, but I just feel like, just the God honest truth, I feel like who I am is just not accepted. Like, just being 100% me. I don't know how to get to that point, but if y'all have any advice, I am all ears. The music, I mean, that's an easy fix for me, because I just listen to, like, whatever music I don't listen to on stream. I listen to it off stream. It doesn't bother me as much. It's just something that I do because I'm in a certain directory. But I wouldn't say I changed myself for the community or anything like that. It's more or less like I'm a little bit more passive than I would normally be. I'm very outspoken, and when I was outspoken, people deemed it as too abrasive. They deemed it as I'm too outspoken, like, I'm too opinionated. And a lot of times, I would have opinions on, varying topics, different conversations, not necessarily about something that's negative, but people don't like me because I have an opinion. And that's something I've come to learn in this particular community. So I'm not really sure how to get around that yet, but I think that's my biggest issue.
Yeah,
You're almost looking at it like from a marketing perspective.
Right.
It's kind of, because you want to do this and you want to prosper while doing it. And it's like, for you especially, it may be also, the angry black woman. No one wants to be that stereotype, right? And it just, when it happens, my whole family is women, and they have that problem constantly. They have to censor themselves constantly. I mean,
exactly.
If they want to, if they want people to, accept them. It's a little different for me because in person I am just me.
right.
Everywhere at all times. Online, I don't have time to deal with your problem with me. I don't, so I just won't deal with it. It's not my problem with me. It's your problem with me, and I can't fix it, so I don't care.
Exactly.
So I'm not going to do it. Period. That's me. That's how I deal with it, and I wouldn't say it's probably the healthiest way. I would, if you want to stream, you probably should take the Sly way.
It's the more sane way.
Yeah.
It's the sane way of dealing with it, in all honesty.
I feel like initially you might get some people that are like, oh, how dare you? But if you beat someone over the head with something enough, they will eventually, I hope, realize, oh, wait, there's nothing wrong with this.
Yeah.
And my problem.
There's something about I totally I got you, because one of the things I noticed first with 14 was exactly what you said. I don't know if he's talk about this, but I have playlists specifically for the types of games that I'm playing, especially with 14, which kind of shares an overlap with the anime community. And I'm a big weeb myself. Don't get me wrong. J-pop, J-rock, it's not a problem for me to put that on. I don't care. But I noticed that there was a visible positive response when I started playing certain types of music versus others. And while it breaks my heart to listen to you say this is stuff that I love, but I feel like I can't do it because of these parts of who I am. While that is, obviously something that I'm like, oh man, I hate hearing that. And I hate feeling like that's something that you have to deal with that additional pressure on. I can totally understand where you're coming from in being aware of that, right? You're right. There is a group there that is interested in a certain sound, but it's definitely one of those things where I think that as somebody who's been doing content creation for a long time myself too, you start almost pushing those boundaries, kind of like Sly, like you were saying, where you're like, what are these parts about myself? Whether or not you were aware of them from the beginning or not, where you're like, what can I push more about myself out into the world and try to get everybody on board with over time? Whether that's just saying hey, today we're going to listen to some of my favorite music, and it's, this, group, and this is why I love them, and it's so good. And I know it's not what we normally listen to, but let's do it. And let's, I just want everybody to enjoy. There are these weird ways that sometimes as a content creator, you have to sidestep yourself, like Zen was saying, for your business, if that makes sense. And
I agree with that. Yeah.
It's not to say that it's not still a place of passion and something that's passionate for you. And as a creator, that you're lying or being ingenuine about yourself. It's just that you're trying to adapt, but at the same time, find your own space in that. And Sly, I love hearing you talk about your freedom in it, because I think that when you come on your stream, you can absolutely feel that you're just this is my zone. You can all come join me in it, and there's a mix to be found there for sure as a content creator, right?
Yeah.
I think pushing it is honestly a great idea, because even the comparison that came to my head for some reason is you're a parent and you're trying to get your kids to eat vegetables, and they're like, ew, broccoli, no. But you make them eat that broccoli. And they're like, actually, this isn't that bad. I kind of like that, right?
Right.
You could introduce somebody to something they thought was terrible, and then when they actually give it a try, they're like, oh, actually, no, I like this. Oops.
Yeah, but it sucks. It sucks on the other hand that you even have to think about it or worry about it. You know what I mean? That it even has to be one of those things where you're this is just a thing that I love, but now I have to spend, X amount of time trying to get everybody on board. So I really appreciate, your perspective on that. It was very good to hear, honestly.
Yeah. I think I'm pretty sure most of us have probably heard, Black people feel like they have to work, 2 times harder than other people. That's a prime example, as far as getting anything done, moving up on the corporate ladder, streaming, what have you. One thing that I think I said this to a friend recently. This kind of stuck with me. I was watching America's Next Top Model recently. Don't ask me why. I don't want to be a model, but I will say that this one girl was auditioning, and she was previously a model for pageantry or whatever. And Tyra Banks, she does editorial high fashion modeling. And long story short, the girl ended up getting on the show, and she took a couple pictures, and they ended up eliminating her, saying that the reason that she couldn't move forward is because every picture, her face or whatever, her poses, they always display some form of pageantry, and they wanted high fashion. And the girl responded and said, well, this is all I know. This is what I've grown to do. I've learned this growing up, whatever, this is just my life kind of thing. So it's kind of really hard for her to break the habit of being a certain way. And Tyra Banks say that's great, and that's okay. But, while you're used to that industry, you have to learn to live in this world. And that's something I kind of took. It's a mindset I kind of took when I decided I wanted to be, a streamer in this directory. It's like, okay, I know this is a community that pretty much is full of people that we mostly don't relate, with anything, with the exception of probably, trapping and PF, whatever the case is. But if I want to be successful in this directory, like, I have to learn to live in this world. I have to learn to speak their language. I have to learn to adapt a little bit. It's not changing myself, it's just adapting for the circumstance. That's the way I see it. So yes, I'm very comfortable, but at the same time, I want to make sure like I'm good in this space. So yeah.
Right.
I'm curious have either or any of you noticed, with obviously all the stuff that's been happening with Black Lives Matter, have you noticed at all with like your content creation and things like that there seem to be more people interested in like exploring, especially within like the Final Fantasy XIV directory, like exploring and looking for Black content creators? Have you felt any of that like increase in interest or love, or do you feel like that's still something that we as a community really need to push for and try to encourage?
I think so you go, Sly.
Yes. To all the above. I feel like during this time, I feel like a lot of attention has been drawn to it. Like a lot of attention. And I was just talking about this with Mel, Happy Smell. Shout out to Mel, Rar Snacks. And we were just talking about it, and like she was like, don't you feel like we're getting a lot of attention on Twitch and everything? I'm like, yes, absolutely. The reality of it is that in a few weeks or months, this will die down. And that momentum, like that shift of momentum that we had, is going to disappear again. And I tell people this all the time, like whether it's tomorrow, whether it's a week from now, a month from now, a couple months down the line, we're still Black. We can't take this off. We can't, like, once we turn off the camera, we are still Black.
Yep.
And just because of the movement, just because you wanted to put attention on us for the movement, there still remains the fact that in terms of content creation, people of color are often, passed by or ignored. It's very prevalent. So don't lose this energy. That's all I can tell, like, anyone running the platform or whatever platform you may be running. Don't lose this energy. Like, we just want the same amount of, treatment and exposure that everyone else gets. Like, just don't lose this energy. That's all I'm saying.
It's an important message. It's been at the end of our show the whole month when we put up our slides and everything. That's very near and dear to my heart as well. Like, stuff passes out of main media very, very quickly. And people forget about it. There's it's I wish I could just list things at the end of the podcast every month that people need to be still thinking about. Like one thing I mentioned last week was ICE. It breaks my heart to think about all of the children that have been separated from their parents because of ICE. And I just list of things that people still need to think about. Go to the internet, type in what are the problems in the world, look up this shit, people.
And while there are, and I think a lot of people are experiencing right now almost passion fatigue, if that makes sense.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
And I think we all feel that. No matter how near and dear and how passionate we are about all these topics, there are times where you open up that Twitter and you're like, oh dear God, I don't want to read 50 things again about, like, I need space, I need time. But
you mean doom scrolling?
Yes. Yes, there's a real thing.
I didn't know that was even a term. Oh, geez.
Me either.
Yeah.
I just learned something new.
And it drains you, but it's one of those things where we have to almost build up our own resilience, and we have to educate ourselves. And I know that, like, obviously myself, I'm like, there have been so many issues that have come up, and I was like, I feel like I'm pretty forward thinking, I'm pretty open-minded, but I have to also acknowledge that I do benefit from white privilege. I don't understand all of this. I don't truly, in a way that like I have lived it, understand this. And the best way to like really keep yourself going is to just educate yourself and to stay aware. And even if it's just a note where you're going like, I need to remember after this dies out on social media, I'm gonna put on a sticky note or something like, I need to check out more Black content creators. I need to research these things. I need to listen for podcasts, talks, whatever it is, we can maintain and sustain that energy. And those of us who may not completely understand everything, we can learn and get closer to understanding with every single thing that we search out. And it's so important to keep that going, even if you're tired, and to take breaks when you need. But remember that like there are still so many ways that we can stay connected to the issues for sure.
Yeah, I know. For me, this past week especially, I mean, it's all of these issues that are coming up right now are so important. And I think it's rough that we're just realizing just how many issues there are. First there was the pandemic. Then, now it's Black Lives Matter, it's Pride Month. There's all these things, all the talk about harassment in the games industry this week. And it's terrible. I mean, every little, every story that was shared that came across my timeline on like Monday and Tuesday, I read, and it was incredibly taxing. But at the same time, we need to be aware of what's happening. We can't just turn a blind eye. Obviously, some people have are able to handle it a little bit better than others. But yeah, it's important, even if you're tired, even if especially if it makes you uncomfortable. I think we need to expose ourselves to what's happening and to be aware of everything that's going on so that it can be made better, so that it can improve for everybody.
Yeah. I think it's
Agreed.
What's the way to put this? It seems like because this community in particular is mostly not people of color, it feels like most people don't care. I'll be honest. That's what it feels like. I don't have any facts. But what makes me say that is, when we're doing our daily doom scrolling, as you say, we come across a lot of topics, like let's just think about this. When Black Lives Matter movements first started, in late May, that was this big craze on Twitter. And I'm gonna be honest, I follow a lot of Final Fantasy streamers, a lot of big streamers, and smaller streamers, and most of the community for the most part was quiet. It's one thing if you don't know what to say, you can literally just type hashtag BLM, do a blackout screen, whatever, something simple. You don't even have to say anything intellectual. But the point is that the community was quiet, and that was something that spoke to me volumes. When it spoke to me was when I think it was 2 weeks later, DMCA started cracking down, and everybody was going crazy, and then the whole sexual assault thing, and it for me it just felt like a slap in the face. Because that, like the sexual assault stuff, it really became apparent to me that was more important, even though that's a really serious issue, don't get me wrong, but it just felt like they regarded that as more important than, what Black people have to endure on a daily basis, what we've historically dealt with, what we're trying to make a difference in the world, and they just don't care. And it really takes zero effort to just support, to just say Black Lives Matter, to sign a petition, whatever. If you want to donate financially, that's between you and your finances. But my point is I mean, it's not being talked about, and it just really, to me, that just really says that like the community they don't really seem to care. That's from my perspective.
From my perspective, I feel like it's kind of hard to fucking keep up.
Yeah,
like really, like it to me. I tell some of my friends this, and I texted some of my friends and talking about this. I'm like, we are living in the darkest timeline. Somebody keeps fucking this shit up, man. And it's like, I look on Twitter, in regards to like a couple of weeks ago with Black Lives Matter, when it really, really got prevalent. And then, I'm just working on my computer, and then the next day, like this is one day, like I guess this past week, I see all these tweets. I'm like, I look away for 1 freaking minute.
Yep.
I'm just working on something, and then boom, another thing happens. Like I feel like mentally, we can't keep up. like mentally, it is taxing with everything that's going on, like with everything going on in succession. It's taxing. It is, we can't catch a break as people of color, as human beings. We can't catch a break right now. We need a goddamn break. We really do. Like, and yeah, you're right. It kind of felt like it just shifted. It was like a diversion, sort of, kind of like, but it's not a diversion. It's just happening. And who knows? Something might be next in like a week and a half or next week. We don't know. I hate to predict it. Somebody's fucking up the timeline. I don't know. But
I see what you guys are saying. Like, oh, go ahead. Sorry. Continue.
Yeah, I'm sorry. But yeah, like, it's not to take away from any situation, whatever it may be. It's not to take away from any situation. This is all fucked up. This is a really fucked up timeline. But you know, I guess it all revolves around, you know, what you are experiencing as a people, what you have experienced or are experiencing does not take away from you at all. Like, you can just be, you know what, just be a good fucking human being.
Basically.
That's it.
Yeah.
So
I'm sorry, go ahead, Zanira.
No, you're totally good. Thinking about the pattern, that definitely was prevalent on my timeline as well. And not only did it move from Black Lives Matter to I was assaulted, it even spiraled down into a worse place of I was assaulted by my boyfriend who I just had a bad relationship with. That's not assault. You weren't actually assaulted. You just had a bad relationship with each other, and it happens. It just happens. And I'm sorry you had a bad, you know, life experience, but that was a life experience that you will hopefully learn from and will be better for. It's not assault.
Right.
So it's like it's going from a thing that really needs to be worked on to like, they hit me, right?
Yeah.
Or they pinched me, not they hit me.
Right. It's yeah, it is a weird time right now. That's the thing that I say the most every single day. It's a weird time.
True.
Yeah, you know, when it first started to happen, I am from Virginia. I'm from the South, so
hey,
yeah, right next door. But you know, there's all this stuff that's happening in Richmond as well. It's, you know, one of those places where I had been as a child. You know, the whole Monument Avenue of statues and things like that, and that was a hot topic. And then it wasn't. You know, like protests were a hot topic, and then they kind of weren't. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to think about. You're right. But I think that as long as, you know, we continue to do this within communities, in the Final Fantasy XIV community, within, you know, gaming as a whole, within, who knows, golf. I mean, obviously, it's called the Masters. Let's not talk about that. But you know what I mean? Like, communities have to start talking about it and seeing what these points are, and then seeing what to do about it. Like, so when it's radio silent, it does no one good. And that's something that, you know, I need to learn from, because I've been radio silent. Not that I ever used Twitter in the first place, but it's just one of those things where if you don't talk about it, it doesn't get better. So
that's true. And B, I think it is.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think I'll be completely honest. I had not really thought about, because I play games in a variety of MMOs. So 14, Guild Wars 2, ESO, a variety of different sort of communities that have like similarities but also differences. And out of all of them, as you were saying that, it dawned on me that although we talk about a lot of issues, and that's something I try to do on my stream a lot, that during my Final Fantasy streams, it was probably the least prevalent out of all of the other ones, which was, I had not even thought about it, to be completely honest. When we were playing Final Fantasy VII, there was even more talk there, because we have like Barret as a character, we have these other themes. But when it came to Final Fantasy XIV, it was very much sort of business as usual. And it's funny, because I know that there are a lot of people, content creators, players, all sorts of people that I know that are diverse in so many different ways within 14. But there does seem to be this sort of weird, I don't know if it's that people don't know how to engage with it, or they're just not sure, or they don't feel like 14 is a space for that, or what it is specifically, or if it could even be that trickling down, I mean, although I was just looking this up because I was curious about it. Although Square Enix did donate, they announced they were going to pledge $250,000 to Black Lives Matter and the organizations, right?
Yeah.
We didn't see like other games or things like that. There were even in-game messages that were saying like, we support Black Lives Matter. There were, you know, special initiatives, incentives, donation, you know, things, all sorts of stuff. But in 14, it did seem like a strangely stiff topic. And that's not to say that it's ever not awkward in place. You know what I mean? Like there's always an awkwardness to discussing heavy social issues, right? But it has seemed to not quite connect with the community in a way that I didn't really think about until you were sharing that.
Yeah, what kind of brought it to my attention more so was I was in a Final Fantasy streamer's chat, and this is someone who I met recently, but I was just in the chat trying to just hang out and get to know the young lady. And I remember she specifically, when I entered, she said, you know, we're just talking about things that are going on in the world. And, you know, the first thing comes to my mind is COVID and Black Lives Matter. People are protesting all over the world. That's not just in America. And so whatever she said COVID, and she said like one more thing. I don't remember what it was, but I just, the thing that stood out was that she didn't mention Black Lives Matter. And this is a Caucasian young lady. She's the white girl. So I remember saying, you know, and yeah, the thing with Black Lives Matter is crazy right now too, with all the protests. That was literally all I said. Now, before I continue with the story, I'll say that before I mentioned that, the girl was talking to me back and forth. She was very receptive and responsive to me. But as soon as I mentioned Black Lives Matter, I was ignored for the rest of the stream. So it made me feel away. And, you know, I waited a little bit to see, you know, maybe she's busy. Maybe she just hasn't gotten to me. And I waited for like 30 minutes to see if like she would talk about it or bring it up or just see what I said or whatever. And after that, I just left because I don't know. It made me feel away. And that's what I feel like. That's how I feel like it's handled for the most part in this particular community. And it's not taking a shot at anyone. Like, I'm like not angry, but it's more or less like, why do people like not care in this community? That's just literally the vibe I get from everybody.
Do you feel like people are afraid of confrontation? Because
I do.
It sort of is confrontation.
It's an uncomfortable conversation. It's an uncomfortable topic.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can agree with that.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot of fear. It's a lot of fear.
Yeah.
But I mean, just like
earlier, though, having that uncomfortable conversation is sometimes the only way you learn anything from it.
Well, that's why we have to have that conversation so that it becomes comfortable. Like that's the whole point of all this. We shouldn't be afraid of anybody. We should be comfortable with everybody. And that's why even if we're tired, even if we're, you know, sick of seeing any of this, we owe it to everybody to expose ourselves to this, to you know, educate ourselves and to make this better.
Yeah, it almost feels like it's not the cool thing to talk about. That's kind of the vibe I get, you know. So
yeah, but it's like human life, and it's important. Like, you know, it's so ridiculous. I mean, yes, I think we all, especially to anybody else who might be out there, if you are, you know, and B, I'm so sorry you had to experience that, right? Because as a content creator who a lot of times I do feel like, I mean, like I was saying, that there are so many topics that I'm going, I do not want to speak irresponsibly about this.
Right.
But silence is its own act. And that's something that over and over and over again in my life, be it on small scales or large scales, has been a lesson. People think that, you know, if I just don't say anything, then I won't offend anybody. Or if I just don't say anything, then I can stay out of it, or I won't make it worse, or I won't, you know, whatever it is, right? But silence is an act of its own oppression and an act of its own, you know, lack of acting. And so it was so wild to me when like a lot of this started, and I was going, I don't want to speak irresponsibly about this, but I also want to support it, and I'm trying to read stuff and trying to educate myself, and I'm, you know, retweeting things and talking about it on stream, even if, you know, I don't always have all of the words for it, and I wish I could speak better, but there are so many other people out in this world speaking better about it, including all of you that joined us today. You know, it's humbling to hear and good to hear. And I had one of my community members reach out to me, and she said, I'm sorry, I mean, this is so silly. But I love her. She's an incredible human being, and she's been through a lot. And she said to me, for a long time in games, I didn't feel as though I could make a black avatar because people would respond differently to me if they knew that I was Black. And she said, the fact that you mentioned Black Lives Matter, that you even said Black Lives Matter on stream today, I started crying. And I was like, it was literally the least that I could do. Like, I've been trying to donate and I've been trying to do all these other things too, but like, people don't always realize that sometimes the least you can do can make the most difference to somebody.
Yeah.
And just being willing to, like, if she had engaged with you and said like, yeah, that is a really serious cause. And even like you said earlier, B, if she'd been like, I don't know how to speak about it, but you're right. And that's really important. That would have been better than nothing.
Right.
And we have to get over our own awkwardness as white people in this world and listen and be willing to be humble and accept that it makes a huge difference if we say anything and we engage on any level, and we should be. You should be going above and beyond, but like, you can't just ignore it.
Right.
I think it's okay if people don't know how to respond, and I'm specifically referring to people who are not Black people, who are not people of color. But I think, if you don't know how to respond and you want to say something, the best thing you can do is ask a friend who can relate to the situation, who's going through these things, who's experiencing any type of racism, racial oppression, what have you. I've had at least a couple people last week reach out to me, some of my white friends, and they're like, B, I've had a Black person say this to me. How do I handle it? B, what can I do to better support it? I don't know how to respond. I think the best thing you can do is ask someone who can relate to the issue, and they can give you some advice. But to not know and just sit there in ignorance is literally a part of the problem.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, like, if you are just a casual Twitch watcher and, like a streamer is like, oh, DMCA takedown, and you're like, that sucks. What does that mean? Wouldn't you look into it? If, wouldn't you find the information, like, and that's just simple, or ask someone, ask the streamer, like, what does that mean? I don't know, that sort of thing. But yeah, that is easier to talk about than Black Lives Matter, than racism, than, just a lot of the topics we're dealing with today, and we have to do it. So,
yeah. And again, right now, there are a lot of resources out there. So again, you can ask someone, you can, go to this website, that website. Hell, everybody's got a list. Like, just go before, if you don't feel comfortable speaking now, do some research, educate yourself. And then you can formulate your own opinion, your own view on the matter, and speak. So, like, you won't be in silence.
Even as a Black woman myself, I found that when all of the protests first broke out, I was struggling. I was at a loss for words. And anybody who knows me knows I'm never at a loss for words. But I was really struggling to get my thoughts together, because while I'd seen all of these crazy things happening, in the streets, I was sad, I was afraid, and there was people asking me, B, do you not have anything to say? I was enraged at one point, because this is yet again the same thing we've seen over a number of years, so it's okay to not know how to say something or whatever. What I did, and this is advice toward for anybody else that feels the same. I didn't know how to express myself when it was all happening right away, and so there was a lot of people on social media expressing themselves in ways that was way better than what I could have said, and it was exactly how I felt. So I just helped, to promote what they were saying, help to promote the awareness by doing a simple retweet, a like, whatever. It's something as simple as that, and it's free. It takes no effort to hit a retweet on a petition or hit a retweet on a really great tweet that's showing a video of whatever, something that we feel like should be shown to the world. So there's many ways you can support. It doesn't have to be financially, but I think awareness is lacking, and it's really important. And the fact, like, when people don't speak up, that feeds into the problem. When people don't retweet or whatever, that feeds into the problem. When people ignore it, that feeds into the problem.
That's why that doom scroll is important. You have to expose yourself to that stuff.
Yeah, and it's it's really important too, I think, that people understand that this is an issue that everybody is involved in. Everybody needs to be involved in. If they're not, it's not one of those things where I'll just, sit around and other people will handle it. Right. That's not the right mentality to have for anything. You need to be involved, even if it is as little as, retweeting, a tweet that's, talking about various, charities, or just, saying how how you feel and agreeing with them. I mean,
Mhm.
just as little as that, it will help. People will notice.
Mhm.
People will appreciate it. And I think that's, you can't expect everybody to take care of this for you. You have to be involved with this. All right.
What I was going to mention earlier was the whole media thing. The big media is super irresponsible. Protests are still happening. The Lee Monument in Richmond is
It's still
there, still covered in graffiti. There is a protest every night. There are still encounters with the police there every day, but media is not covering it anymore. So it's up to small media. It's up to us and our Twitters, our Instagrams, whatever, to make sure that that information is online somewhere so someone can see it and realize this stuff is still happening.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree 100%.
I think that circling back to, and I mean, Fusion, obviously, there's a lot of other things to talk about, and it's been such a good discussion so far. But I mean, circling back around to specifically Final Fantasy XIV, I think there are, and this is some of their talking points that we even had today. There are maybe some reasons or some things in the game itself that have maybe not caused like a disconnect for players, or that even when we were talking on our Pride episode, areas where representation and things like that could be better, right? Where just by having representation, we could have maybe some more, visibility and options. We've got a siren going by here in the city, so 1 second.
There's usually at least one.
There's usually at least one. But there's a lot of topics even in the game, and with Aetheryte Radio and all of us being Final Fantasy players, obviously there's good and bad. There's all sorts of stuff, right? So I didn't know if we wanted to transition into that next portion of the talk, or if we wanted to continue where we are.
Sure, I mean,
I'm down to clown.
Yeah, we may as well talk about, the things in 14 that aren't as they should, or maybe are. I'm looking at this list and there's not a lot that are, but still, we got to talk about it, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So before we get into the specifics here, as a person of color, do you feel like you are represented in Final Fantasy XIV with the cast of characters, the NPCs? Do you feel like there are enough Black characters in the game?
No.
No.
And I don't want to sound like Debbie Downer, but the only Black person I can think of in a game is obviously Robin. And, people always say, well, you got that Black guy. And it's like, that's just it. We got that Black guy, not some Black guys. So it reminds me of Final Fantasy VII. There's just one Black guy in Final Fantasy VII. So it's just like, it almost feels like we're just checking off a box to say, okay, we got a Black guy in there. We can just throw whatever else we want now. So I feel like we're underrepresented? Greatly. Like, it's just I don't think we should have like a whole population of like Black characters, but all I'm saying is like we should have more than one.
Right.
We should have more Black hairstyles, more ethnic hairstyles. I think the voices are fine. We got the Vieira voices and everything, and the really manly Highlanders and I think those are fine, but I think we could do more with the hairstyles and just having more NPCs, more story characters that are involved, greatly, that play a role, that are people of color. They don't necessarily have to be Black, but just people of color.
Right.
Yeah.
Then again, that brings the conversation up of like, people of color in fantasy or high fantasy in general, and how can the two of them mesh? Like how we can make that happen. So that's a good conversation to have as well. So I don't know where to start though. I mean, you see it, we see it in media today. Idris Elba and Thor.
Right.
Right. And you see like there's a lot of other examples where it can be done. What do you think about that? Well, like,
I think a lot of people,
can it happen?
I don't know. I think a lot of people try and make the argument that, well, that's not historically accurate. Who cares? Who gives a flying fuck?
And history is so much more diverse than anybody even anticipates. I mean, this is something that we've talked about with Pride, with LGBT, QIA plus interests and all sorts of things. There are so many historical figures of color, so many historical figures who, were any range of LGBTQIA plus. But because history is told from a very fixed perspective, we don't always see that. And when we're talking about a fantasy world, it is fantasy. It's based on the premise that whatever you can imagine is literally the world. You know what I mean? So, I mean, you brought up Idris Elba, I think as well about Black Panther and the fact that there are so many people who were like, well, it's superheroes, so it's got to have this Americanized twist. And then Black Panther came out and was like, well, suck it. And it's amazing. And you're like, this is great to see like costume designs, to see all of these different things, these actors, and people are praising it so much, but you're sitting there kind of going like, it's people didn't have that idea. I mean, there's been a lot of media that's had fantasy that isn't just Western based or, based in those sorts of cultures. And it's like bringing that in, I think, is so important.
It's like a paragraph in your lore somewhere to say that, there are people from all over the globe, and some of them have darker skin, and now we're all mixed together in this area, and now there are Black people in that area. It doesn't have to be a fantasy Africa or a fantasy slave trade. Please do not do that. Like it doesn't have to be those things. You control it. You can just add it. Like nobody's going to ask a question. Like it's going to be there. So good. I think that there's a lot of people who think that they have to rationalize it. Why? Why did you rationalize that there's a west or an east? Why is Kugane? Okay. Sure. Okay, so you put them all there. You didn't have to, So it's just one of those things where I don't know if it's, designers or writers or what that just they think they have to justify it when you don't. You just do not have to justify it.
Right.
I don't know how to fix that. I mean, that's cultural. I don't know. Who knows? But
I think the other more recent example I kind of wanted to bring up, it is based on history. It's not actually fantasy, but Hamilton the musical, right?
Everybody loves Hamilton.
Yes, everybody loves Hamilton. Why not change it? What's wrong with that? Those actors are still as amazing as any white actor, if not more amazing, right?
Right.
Give a person credit for what they can do. I don't know. I where am I going?
Yeah. And I mean, I think some of this as well, and we had made a note about it. I mean, this was another really interesting little conversational tidbit that came up recently on stream for me. I had somebody ask me, what anime can you name that has a Black or, a person of color as a protagonist? And I went,
That's a good question.
Berserk, and terrible things happen to her.
Yes. I mean, Avatar: The Last Airbender, but again, that's not specifically that's not a Japanese produced anime, right? So I'm like, well, there's Avatar: The Last Airbender. And like, there's all these shows that I like to watch, but when I'm thinking specifically about Japanese media, we have maybe a Black character, maybe they are handled well, maybe they are not. I mean, it's always very question mark. I could think of Dot Hacksign. We have a darker skinned female protagonist who's, pretty prevalent throughout it. I'm trying to think of any others. If anybody else has any other, Dragon Prince, again, I see in chat is again great. And we also get dark skinned elves, which is a whole nother amazing thing. But again, it's sort of that crossover, right? It's produced through Netflix. It's not Japanese media.
And
Samurai Champloo, maybe has.
I think there's some. Yeah. Okay, I go back as far as Cowboy Bebop to say that I associate Jet with being Black.
Right. Yes.
Not like through not only through voice, but like if they still are, I believe, working on live action film, I think Jet will be portrayed by a Black man.
I'm not sure. So. I think so.
Okay.
I'll double check that.
Black Lagoon. Dutch from Black Lagoon. Heck, you can go back.
Utena.
Anthony, thank you.
That's a good one.
Going back to original Macross, I forget the lady's name.
Lisa, I think.
Lisa, thank you.
Yeah.
God, I can keep going.
Yeah.
Killer Bee and Naruto.
Oh boy, yeah.
Yeah, stop me. Please.
It's one of those.
I'm just here like I recognize some of these names. I've never seen these shows, but I've heard of them.
Me either.
Yeah. Well.
Okay, I don't feel so bad now. I'm not the only non-weeb here.
You're good.
When you start getting into mech,
just taking this over. Okay.
But there's this weird thing. And recently I can think of the fact that I've been watching through One Piece. And there are a few things in One Piece that are incredibly problematic in a lot of ways, and a lot of things that are really good. And I mean, you have a few characters that in many ways could be possibly codified as Black, but who are oftentimes like the butt of the joke or are portrayed really weirdly. There's a really great representation of gender ambiguity. And then there's also an incredibly offensive island where, is it Sanji is running around and it's supposed to be his training, but he spends the whole time running away from men who are cross-dressing, saying they're the most hideous things he's ever seen. Like, there is this dissonance and I think a problem with Japanese media in so many ways that has not always been very diverse or shown a good range of characters or even LGBTQI plus representation. I was just watching through Yuri on Ice with a friend, and it's like this whole show is so gay. It's gay, but they still hide the kiss that happens in the show, and you're sitting there like, these men have told each other that they are isolating soulmates. Like, they kissed, guys. You can show it. We know they kissed.
Yeah.
But there's this weird thing, and I think we also see that in Final Fantasy XIV, right? That like you were saying, B, there's like a character or there's these things, but there's also kind of a weird indirect, not totally really tackling, but also being more progressive sometimes than some other Japanese media can be. We talked about it on the LGBTQIA plus episode as well with Pride. Like, yeah, sure, there's some diversity representation, but it's not fully committed. And B, I thought you brought up a great point, and I'm curious to hear about the character creator and even just like making a character, how everybody feels like the options are, what are more options you'd want to see, all sorts of things within that.
Well, I know that when I was creating my character, I was like, okay, I'm going to be an Elezen. All right, cool. So there's two types. There's Wildwood and there's Dusk. Oh, I see. Okay. Well, all right. Well, that's cool. I don't really want to be one of those, though. So I made a Wildwood that was dark-skinned, but no one knows that. They're like, oh, you're a Duskwite. No. I mean, you can't really tell, of course, but it's just one of those things where those unrealistically, like, and some of them are realistic, but some of them are very blue tinged and things like that. They're very other. They're not very human. They're very other. And I don't mean that to sound as condemning as it is, but it's not what I think of as representation. I don't think of the Drow in Dungeons and Dragons as representation. That shouldn't be thought of just because they're dark skinned. So it's like, it's hard to find anything.
And I was just saying that, like, I'm probably the wrong person to ask about character creation, and like, because I'm basic. Whenever I do character creation, in these fantasy settings where, people of color aren't really prevalent, I just create me. Like, bald head, beard, eyes to match. That's it. That's all I need. Now, for other people who want to create them, I feel like in terms of like we were talking about before the podcast, like hairstyles, like black hairstyles, especially like natural hair, that's something that we really need. And again, this goes back to whenever we need something or whenever we have a problem with the game, we go to the producers, we go to the forums, we say, hey, Yoshi P, can you include this? And I feel like now is probably the best time. Strike while the iron's hot. Well, this is on everybody's mind, like inclusion of, more hairstyles and more features that you would normally see on people of color.
Right. And, while for all of its failures in, I mean, being a good MMO recently. That's a shot across its bow, but whatever. They've started to add to human character customization different races, like different analogs to real life races, and some of those are they didn't even have to do much, but when you see it, it's like, oh look, they actually did it. They actually tried, and it wasn't even that difficult. It was a face or two. That's it. Cool. That's a good start. You don't have to all of a sudden make a character creator that can encapsulate every individual, but just more options, to start being closer to you. It's really it. And I don't know, it is a Japanese game, and that's a whole nother conversation that we've been having.
Right.
There are those who
All right, I should be okay.
are like,
thank you.
They don't even have a responsibility to do it. Like, I don't know. I think as soon as you are a worldwide game, you have the responsibility, right?
And I think there's still more that they can do, but
sure.
They have taken some steps, right? When the Eternal Bond stuff came out, they're like, gender doesn't matter, like whatever. There's been, and I'm trying to remember where I read this. I don't know if it was just like a random comment on a stream, or if it was in one of his Famitsu articles, but I can remember Yoshida talking about a mom and a son that talked about wanting to like wear a dress, and the mom was like, no, you can't do that. And Yoshida was like, I felt really sad about that. Like stuff like that. I'm very confident that Yoshida would love to see more of this stuff. And whether or not it's because Square Enix is a Japanese company, or what the issues are, but I think the good thing is, at the bare minimum, he acknowledges that things can be better, and I think that's definitely a step in the right direction. One thing that we were going to talk a little bit about too, right, when we talked about characters of color in Final Fantasy XIV, Raban was like the only name that really came up for a lot of us. And
Ilberd.
Ilberd,
Ilberd too.
Ilberd and Raban.
Oh, I forgot about him.
And when Stormblood hit, everyone's like, this is Raban's time to shine.
Right.
And then they're like, oh, by the way, did you know that Yida is actually her sister, and she's like Alamegan royalty? And they kind of pushed her to the front. How do you guys feel about that? I mean, in terms of both, as somebody, as a person of color, but then also narratively, do you think that they just did it to take Raban out? Because I would have liked to have seen Raban take that role over more than Lise.
I'll say I didn't feel strongly about it, but it was something I definitely took note of. That's the most I can say. Like, it didn't bother me, but I was like, I'm always rooting for Raban. So it's just, I don't know. It just feels like he's always,
cut the guy's arm off. Like, give him a break. Like,
I just feel like he's always in the background doing stuff, but he's never at like the forefront. So
From a story perspective, I kind of see where they went. Raban's getting up there in years and everything. He's been through the ringer, essentially. So to kind of shift and advocate towards younger leadership, I can see that. That isn't to say, and I hope and pray that in the future, another character who we know as a person of color will get some shine, and we don't know when that day would be. But like B, I wasn't really too bothered by it. But yeah, now that you mention it, we'll call him A, we'll call him B. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought he was going to be the focus, but
and it's interesting. Looking back, I mean, again, right, since I have a huge background with Final Fantasy XI, with Square Enix, they have this tendency to make the focused protagonist a white young girl in almost everything. Every expansion for 11 is a white female. There's Lion, there's Prish and Olmio, and I guess they're a little darker skinned. I don't know where that line is for that necessarily. But then you have Aphmau in Otter Gone. You had Lilithset in Wings of the Goddess. You had Arcelia in Seekers of Adeline. And so you look at that, and then up against 14, you have Minfilia. You have a little bit of Alice, but then you have I'm just thinking of all the other female characters.
Rina?
Hilda. You have
Ishtola.
Reem, Ysayle.
Ishtola.
And yeah. Well, and Y'shtola is weird because I feel like Y'shtola's skin tone has changed.
Okay, so it's not just me. I thought that too.
Yeah, it's really weird. Like depending on where you see her, like sometimes it's just artwork, sometimes it's really odd that there's not. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of consistency.
Right.
Well, I mean, I hate saying this, and it's nonsensical. But I mean, when you look at especially what a lot of gaming companies have thought that players want, and this has been a big discussion in MMOs for ages and all sorts of games, right? Especially when it comes to like female representation in the game. What sells scantily clad women? Yep. And it's like this constant discussion about like, well, maybe give them some more armor or maybe, whatever it is, right? And I think especially within the JRPG genre, the idea of this like shining, beautiful, pure young woman who like is, so alluring in some sense and maybe magical and mystical in another is not out of place. And it's, I assume, but again, I don't have a ton of evidence or, stuff to support this. So sells in a sense.
Yeah.
But it was very weird. I mean, I'm glad that it wasn't quite as dissonant as I kind of thought it would, because it was strange at the time that I was playing through Stormblood. I was playing a Highlander woman that I had given because of the sort of, other characters we had seen with Raubon and Ilberd and everybody else. I had, chosen a darker skin option, and I was like, oh, I'm really into the whole lore of Alamigo and like all this stuff, and I think it's really neat. And it was weird playing through it because it did feel like Raubon carried so much of that narrative and his passion for his people, and he was always working to try and free them. And then to have like this very dissonant young woman unmask herself and be like, I will be the hero we need. I was even just sitting there from like a headcanon RP standpoint, like, what? Like my girl in my head is also from Alamigo, but like that final shot of Lee standing on the like, she's got the nationalist anthem behind her, and she's standing there with the flag ahead of everybody, and Raubon's like wedged in the corner, and like your character is like wedged in the back. It was weird to me. But I mean, that was just my perspective. So it's one of those things where I'm glad that it wasn't wildly dissonant, but it is strange. I don't know.
Square is very odd in the way that they handle their female protagonists. I mean, the most recent thing that comes to mind, and I kind of wish that they got more shit for it, in all honesty, with that Shiva fight with Reen. The weeks leading up to that patch, there were lots of discussions about various underage modding of character models and stuff, and then the fight comes out, and then there's a mechanic where you have to look away because she gets naked and changes. Like, what the actual fuck, Square? Like, really?
I know a lot of people are not that upset about that fight. And there are, of course, reasons like, oh, she's channeling a primal, she's channeling all these other things.
Sure.
But for me personally, it did always come down to like, she looks the same as she does, just bigger, because she's a boss, so she's got to be big. And that's a child's body. And even if she's possessed by a spirit or a like, it's watching that cutscene 100 times every time we do weekly reclears drives me crazy, because that dragon snakes up her naked body every single time, and I'm like, Square Enix, you just told people they can't do mods that literally do what you did in the game. Like,
I'll never forget. I was in this one young lady stream, not to cut you off, and
no, you're good.
It's a stream I frequent, and
everybody that's tuning in, so sorry. Internet is interneting really hard today. I don't know what the deal is. It's just
Sweet, we did a little bit. We had a lot of feelings.
I haven't had any issues with this for months, and then today, all right. So, we were talking about,
B was giving us the lowdown about the streamer that you were watching, and that the whole thing there with watching the transformation and how sometimes Final Fantasy XIV, but Square Enix as well, kind of toes the line with certain things that might not be wholly appropriate.
Yeah.
I still wish Urianger had taken Shiva instead of Reen. That would have been great.
That would have been very good.
I have many thoughts about the choices that were made in that storyline, but that's a whole other discussion.
And we've had it before.
Yeah, we have several times.
Would that be like the first astrologian boss if he took on the Primal?
Yeah.
Yes, it would. Oh my gosh.
That would be.
There you go.
Look, I'm just saying the combo of like the sort of Heidelin and the ice was very good, but add some stars in there and we're really getting something.
Then you really wouldn't be able to see. Already can't see.
I know, right? When she redresses, I'm just like, please, God.
I was just so mad. I was just so mad. And like right before the fight, when you have the cutscene and Reen's like, I'm volunteer. I'm like, no, the fuck you don't.
Right.
You sit back down.
It's just you are a minor.
Right.
It's bad decisions. The raid story. That's all this is. And now the adults are gone. I can't wait to see the bullshit that they come up with for the next year. My expectations are so low right now.
I mean, I don't want to say, like, for a long time, they've really been trying to figure out, like, how can they make fights that are hard enough they don't get cleared, like, right the first week. But if Urianger had been the one doing the redress, I think all the raid parties would have wiped because nobody would have turned away from that. It's just all I'm saying.
There you go.
I agree 100%.
Extend out that difficulty a little bit.
I think they might have wiped from being blinded by astrologian animations. Like, holy crap, man. Celestial opposition is just like epilepsy right there.
But it is interesting because, I mean, while All Amigo and like all of this is to say that, I mean, All Amigo again is technically, like, we see a lot of diverse people that make up the population of All Amigo, I guess, and that region. But it did feel a little bit odd to me. So I was really glad to hear your perspective on that. And there are these weird missteps sometimes where I kind of do go like, go ahead,
it's when you were talking about the, like Menphilia and Reen, and you started naming adjectives like shining and pure and beautiful. That's why, because that's not how Black people are represented or how
very true
they're supposed to be looked at. Like, when you think pure and beautiful, at least for some cultures, that's not what you think. You think, porcelain skinned. You think, that long straight hair. You think of those things. So to me, it's just them perpetuating the same thing that so much other media has a problem with anyway. That is exactly why they picked them, because they're pure and beautiful to the most number of people, I think. And that's unfortunate.
And that's who you want to appeal to.
Okay, given what we know lore-wise and, areas that we haven't visited, do you think representation is possible and the devs will do it? Like, maybe, I don't know, like Razatan, like places we haven't been before. Trying to think anywhere else.
Like the New World.
Hell.
Yeah.
The New World.
The Avner. Yeah, well, Razatan.
Right? Yeah. Hell, do you even think the deeper we get into Garlemald, we'll see representation as well?
I would like to.
Well, it's not a bad idea. Yeah.
The benefit of this, and I'm trying to remember what the example was, and we gave them a lot of crap for this before, with what we wanted them to do and with the narrative and stuff. It's their narrative; they can make it be whatever they want.
Yeah.
If it's not even a matter of lore or anything at that point. If you want characters of color in the game, add them, and then you can bullshit whatever excuse you need to. It doesn't matter. Just add them.
Right.
It
I mean,
is a
Sly,
fantasy game.
yeah, it's a
Right.
fantasy. And Sly, I think it's interesting because what you were just describing, like, and obviously I want to hear all of your thoughts more on this too, but it almost perfectly leads us into even just, I mean, what we were going to talk about next anyway, and what we saw chat talking about, which is the Viera.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that, like, if we're talking about opportunities that they could have taken to create more, representation visually in the game, right? The Viera are one that's incredibly iconic as far as Fran goes within the Final Fantasy XII verse, although obviously with tactics, we had some other things added in there with Vina and stuff. But that is, at least canonically, set in the forest, set from 12, a group of Amazonian women, like, who live, a warrior's life in the woods, sort of sequestered away, who are, in 12 at least, almost all dark-skinned. And yet what we got in Fanau, almost every NPC, and especially the ones that you talk to that have quests, are all light-skinned.
Yep.
And somebody also, one of my viewers brought this up in chat, I was running around. I have a character, Fran's one of my favorite Final Fantasy characters. So when Viera came out, I made a Viera that looks a lot like Fran. And I had somebody come into chat the other day and say to me, "Why is your Viera black?" And I was sitting there like, what? Like, is this an actual question? And I was like, you realize that the Viera, hold up. You realize that the Viera, at least a huge portion of them, at least like an entire, branch in the lore of Final Fantasy that we've seen, are dark-skinned women. Like, and I had to sit there and be like, go to 12, check out the source material. And I was like, and also, I just think, people can be beautiful in all different shapes and colors.
Right.
But it's baffling to me that, like, by choosing to do something like this, I think in a way Square Enix has affected the player base, where people who might not even know 12 might think that it is non-canonical that Viera are dark-skinned.
It almost seems like it's wrong to be dark-skinned in the, as a character in the game.
Right.
Mhm.
Which is
That's baffling.
a whole nother can of worms to go into.
Don't get me started.
Yeah, of course. We don't
Or you
really. I don't know.
Totally
That's
can.
that's not really a 14 issue. In
Yeah,
general. It's more
broader
of a
spectrum.
Yeah, it's a more of a like we were talking about earlier, feeling that you can't present yourself, feeling that some blackness is better than other blackness. Lighter skinned blackness is, or, people who have lighter skinned are closer, so they're more, they can fit in better. That's sort of that is prevalent and in the community and just in the world and from outside races looking in. It's one of those things, and to do that with the Viera, like, seeing that, it didn't, I mean, I wasn't going to make a Viera anyway, but it didn't make me feel good about them being in there, because they got everything else so right.
Yeah.
And then they just decided but we want people to play them, so maybe we'll just have an option, for people who don't want to look like that. And of course, options are great, but it's one of those things where, did you have to? Because they were never not dark skin. So, I mean, they were lighter skin in Tactics Advanced, but it's weird that all the NPCs aren't, I don't understand why.
You know what I thought about while we were talking about the VRs, and Rook was talking about, basically said a viewer asked her about why is her Viera skin color black. What's funny is I got the opposite one day. For people who watch my stream on a regular, y'all know I have a couple alts and they're all Vieras because I just love Vieras that much, okay? But my main character, I Fantasia her, and her skin is like almost pale white. And I didn't do that for any other reason except for the look that it gave her with blonde hair. Like, I just wanted it to look cute with blonde hair. And the look I was going for, it didn't go as well with darker skin. So it was also a preset look. Like, how you do the randomizer and you just kind of keep clicking. I did it until I got that look and just kind of modified her face. I'm like, okay, I want my Viera to look like this now. And I've had several people in my chat ask me, why is your Viera so white? And on the opposite spectrum, I don't know if it's because I'm black that I have to make a black character. I don't know, but it's a fantasy game and I want to make my character look like however I feel like, in that particular moment. So I thought it was really weird that someone asked me that. Like, on one end of the spectrum, it's like, white skin is highly overrepresented, and when I do a white character as a Black woman, it's a problem. You know what I mean? So it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I didn't know how to respond to it. I still don't know like almost how to feel about it. But I mean, like, what do y'all think about that? Like that question, like from, I guess someone who's probably not Black. I'm guessing they weren't Black because most of my Black viewers didn't even think to ask me that. But like, what are y'all thoughts on that?
To a degree, I mean, I would just argue, like, what does it matter what my character looks like? It's my character,
Right.
100% that. Like, why are you asking what does it matter?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
The options have to be there.
Yeah,
the options
see, I
have to
thought so
be
It's
there.
rude.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's rude. My alternative would be, have you seen Mr. Face? You're gonna ask me what I look like? Really? Even still, it's none of your damn business. But even still,
Yeah.
Really? Yeah.
I really don't. I don't think the problem is like the option. I think the problem is the representation in the game for the dark-skinned Viera. Like you can be whatever you want to be, and there should be more options to be what you want to be. But when it's codified in the game, that's where we start getting into a problem. To me, like it doesn't matter what anyone plays. Like I don't typically pick a character that has my skin tone. I did it in 14 just because I felt like it. Because I was playing and I was like, okay, I wonder if I can. So I did, and I stayed that way.
Right.
But no other MMO have I even tried to. So.
Yeah, the power of customization is a big thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where, and we again talked about this in the Pride episode, that there can be so many different things, especially in an MMO, where you can explore yourself, or even just a whim, or just, you randomize and you find something you think is kind of aesthetically cool, or there's so many different ways that people connect to their characters that it is, I agree that I think there is something really nice about being able to create anybody you want to. And I do usually encourage a lot of people who might have, a more narrow-minded perspective that might lead them to ask some of those rude questions, like whatever it is. I'm like, make a character that's totally different than you ever thought you would ever make, and try to see if you can get like really invested in that character's story. Try to see if you can like really, still connect to that person. But when it comes down to it, people can make whatever they want. And I think they should be empowered to in an MMO, because that's a huge part of it. But Aldi, you hit the nail on the head. I can't say it any better. The idea that like there is something about setting a, like we were talking about earlier with social spaces, even setting a tone or precedent within the game that then reflects almost like a world and diversity and mindset in all sorts of different ways that makes people feel seen, included, represented. It makes the world feel as though like, hey, even if it's low level in the background, we have a lot of people that play this, and they're, it's a big, vast fantasy world, and there's all kinds of possibilities within that. Even just with like, give me more Rugadin women in the story, give me more buff women. Like there's so many different things that fall under that. But I think that broadening players' minds is only ever a benefit to the community to allow more people in.
Here's a question I had. The only two we've been able to come up with were Ilberd and Raubon, right? How does it make you feel that one of them is a bad guy?
Fine.
Yeah?
Yeah.
To me, it's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't think twice about it.
Yeah. There's only two of them anyway. So it's like, so one or the other, I guess. If it was like, they were the only option is bad. Like if they were, subjugated by the Empire and now they only do bad things or something like that. And it's more of a cultural trait than a personality one, because Ilbert was just an asshole, right?
Yeah.
They exist in every color.
Complicated bad guy, that's for sure.
Yeah. When I saw him as a bad guy, I didn't think about skin color or anything. It just I think I was just too into the story, but I didn't think twice about Ilbert being a bad guy at all. Yeah.
Yeah, because the thing that I really don't want, and this is personal, I don't know, no Black person is a monolith, but what I don't want is pandering. I don't want the overcorrection in the opposite direction, because one, that doesn't feel good for the people who want the representation, and two, it causes a backlash that makes it even worse in the people who didn't want to see it in the first place. And to me, that's not worse. We should still push it, but you have to know that that's going to happen. right?
Yeah.
The more you add, the more people are gonna find reasons to not like it. It's a very thin line, you know. I don't really know.
Is
I
there
think
is there something you would like to see them do then, like specifically? I mean, because there is that kind of that I hate to say it, like a balancing act kind of, right? You don't want to
Right.
pander, but you want to be inclusive. How would they do that? Do you have any thoughts?
Make it not a big deal. It's not a big deal. We go to Razatan, and there's black people, and there's Elizin, and there's whatever, and everybody has, you know, it doesn't even have to be an equal distribution of who's NPCs, who do quests or whatever. Just whoever you decide. Like, I've decided on an NPC. Why
Yeah.
couldn't they be black?
Yeah.
Why not? Instead of why make them? Why not? What reason would you have not to? If there's a reason not to, okay. But if there's no reason not to, then it should be an option in the first place, you know?
What would be really cool is if a Black Viera led that community. That would be pretty dope to me.
Yeah.
Yes. Or even if we got to see more Fran, because I did see a lot of people mention that like Fran is technically the first Viera that you meet in 14.
Yeah.
But how many people have actually unlocked all the 24 mans? How many people have actually not skipped all the cutscenes? How many people have actually, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
She's an iconic character, but she's not iconic to the story of 14, if that makes sense, right?
Right.
She's not a member of the Scions. She's not all these different things. And it was really interesting because I actually hadn't thought about this until that question about Ilberd and Rauban popped up. Almost all of the Alamegan men we see, and a lot of the like refugees and things, are darker skinned. But almost all of the Alamegan women we see are light skinned. Like Fordola. I was thinking about
good
Fordola.
opportunity.
Yeah.
And and it's really weird to me because I don't think it read badly to me. Again, it's just a player, you know, outside of a lot of it didn't read badly to me that Ilberd and Rauban were both dark skinned and one was a villain and one wasn't, because it was a theme of brotherhood, right? Like this idea that like we were brothers, and whether that's genetic or not, like we were from this same country, we've been fighting for the same cause, and now we're at this divisive point where we're realizing that there may be drastic measures that need to be taken, and that has put us in conflict with one another. And that is compelling and interesting. And I really liked it. So it didn't, like, there was a lot of context to it, and it made sense because in my mind I was going, oh, Alamigo, it's a nation, you know, that's set sort of in the desert, and it makes sense to me that like a lot of the people there probably would be darker skinned or, you know, things like that, just from what we know of our own geography, IRL, you know what I mean? But then it was weird when we started getting female characters, and I was like, why are they all so white though?
It doesn't make any sense. Alamigo was such a great opportunity to do something with that, because they were all fighting for one, you know, for their country. Race didn't matter. Station didn't matter. It was a great way to show, hey, it doesn't matter. This isn't weird. It's not weird. I mean, people exist. It shouldn't be weird. It shouldn't be like, oh, we have to make a show of it. It should be no big deal. That's what I want.
Right.
You know what I just thought about? As Rick was speaking, is that I think I thought of another Black guy in the story, and I, for the life of me, can't remember his name, but he was the guy that did the instance towards the latest patches where he was with Estinian, and they were trying to escape the Garlean Empire.
Guys.
Yeah, that guy. Is he's Black, right?
He's got he's like
he's darker toned.
Yeah. I can't tell. Do we count him?
I don't know.
Do you find it?
I don't know.
That's hard. That's hard because I don't know where you make where that line is for that. I don't know.
I've never thought of him in that way.
I would definitely put him on the person of color label.
Yes.
But as far as like where in the dichotomy, I don't know.
That's a good point though, because you're right. And we didn't see him outside of his armor until he started playing more of a role in opposition to the Empire. And he's a big and beloved and iconic character. I didn't even necessarily think about that.
Yeah, that just popped in my mind.
Yeah, to me, he's kind of ambiguous, which is cool as well. But that's another opportunity. But then again, it's like, would it even matter at that point? You know, like if all of a sudden, you know, they were like, well, we'll just change him a couple shades darker, unlike Yustola, you know, in the opposite direction, and then really pivot towards that. I don't think that I would enjoy that either, you know?
Right.
it is interesting comparing to some degree, but I mean, obviously they're both different games in a lot of rights. But Final Fantasy XIV and sort of their fantasy world, which draws a lot more from Final Fantasy, as an entire franchise, and then Guild Wars 2, where with the release of one of their expansions, Path of Fire, the whole thing is set and sort of centered around the human race, but the human race in Guild Wars 2 does have a lot of geographical regions that are very similar that they've lived into to our own Earth, right? So their Path of Fire takes you into a portion that is very much like Egypt and kind of the surrounding areas. And with that, they did introduce a whole bunch of like natural hairstyles and skin tones and things that went into the CC, but also like almost every major character in that region, because of where they live and the people that they are, is like, sort of inherent to that area. And there's some really fun like fantasy stuff that they did with reimagining sort of the this like whole world around the undead and all this stuff and like the Book of the Dead and all, like it's very interesting. But they got praised a lot for that. And they've been very, focused on that sort of diversity and inclusion. And it is interesting to me because I think that, Sly, going back to what you were saying, I think Square Enix could do it no problem. I think we have a whole bunch of places in the world that easily, and like Aldino, you were saying, we don't even have to make a big deal about it if we don't want to, which is a big question. Like, do we need to have all these separations of the same races as we do in real life and fantasy? That's a question I would love to hear everybody weigh in on. But it just depends on how they choose to do it, because you can choose to do it and it can be great, but it has to be something that they decide to do and then consciously address some of the weird patterns that they have to fix and to, rebalance.
Yeah, I mean, they can definitely do it. I mean, if you just look at, Heaven's Word and Shadowbringers, right? They add a new race into the game. They're just there. Okay, we didn't have them before. It's not like some story like, oh, they all just happen to migrate now out of all times for whatever reason. It's just they've been around. They're there. Right. Easy enough to, it doesn't need to have some huge elaborate story. I mean, if you wanted to, you could take us to a new area and maybe there are just, there's more black people over there. Okay, that doesn't, sure, that's fine. I think it would be really cool if we went to somewhere like the New World and they introduced like a female protagonist and she was like our Estinian or our Lise or whatever for 6.0. I think that'd be awesome. And hopefully that that's something that they can do, that they acknowledge that that's something that probably should be done. We need that representation in there, and not just Raban, who then gets his arc taken by Lise, or a villainous character, or we need to have it. So if we say, hey, are there any black characters in 14, we should be like, yeah, there's a whole bunch of them. I can't list them all, but there's a bunch of NPCs. There's a few, there's some main story people. Like, it shouldn't be like, oh, there's Raban. Like, that's no, that's not how it should be.
Yeah.
All right, we are getting a little close for time here. So real quick, before we start to kind of wrap this up a little bit, we want to talk about Black Lives Matter a little bit. And how you've been discussing it. We touched on this just a little bit earlier, but for B and Sly, how have you been discussing everything that's been going on with your communities? How have you been addressing it?
B?
I'll go. For me, it's been more of a conversation. When it comes up, I try to not force things. I'm a fan of letting things genuinely happen. So whenever we're raiding or we're chilling, whatever the case might be, if somebody, talks about, hey, did you hear about this or did you see this? We'll discuss it. And, whatever the case of the matter is, that happens in chat. Obviously, we don't go into anything that's too, what's the word, that would, I would say, get people riled up, but we definitely make people aware. I've had, Black Lives Matter in my stream titles. Just letting people know that, like, I support this cause, and if you want to be part of, this community, this channel, like, this is something you should be okay with. You need to be, I don't know, it's not nothing I've done that was in like a uniform manner, but we've definitely had conversations about it. I want to say it that way. So it's more or less like, what's happening today. Oh, this happened XYZ Black Lives Matter. Did we make any progress, or did you get any news? Great. And we'll discuss it and move on. But it's nothing like crazy where we have like a segment. I wouldn't say crazy, I'm sorry. It's nothing where we have a segment or something, set in stone at a certain time and we'll go, into detail about it. So yeah, just more of a chit chat.
A couple of weeks ago when it happened, we decided, Mike and I decided to take Tuesday off of Stay in the Realm and just off in general. And for me, that was to let everyone, make themselves aware of the situation, make themselves aware of the issue. I told them, look, if you I'm not streaming today, but if you would just take the time to, research the issue, make yourself educated about the issue, make yourself aware, and support Black Lives Matter. You don't have to do it monetarily, just we while your money would be put to great use, we just want someone to listen. We just want someone to stand with us. And that's the most we can ask for, honestly. And as far as conversation, I brought it up in stream before. I brought it up on Stay of the Realm. We can't turn this off. No matter what, days are gonna pass, movements will pass, protests will die down. We're still Black. We still will have injustice. And so it's important to, keep up with everything. Make sure, you are there for people. Help. Mike, texted me, DM'd me every day to make sure I was okay. And that was during when the protests were really, really deep. And I'm like, I'm good. But I appreciated that. He's one of the real ones. He is a really good friend. And then people were just hitting me up. I was hitting other people up, some of my friends around streaming and content creation, and of course my parents and everything. But this is something that we can't really let die down. So again, you absolutely do not have to support this monetarily. If you do, great. But just make sure to keep the same energy. That's all I can ask, is that you, to those watching and listening, make sure just to, lend us a hand, lend us an ear, stand with us. That's all we can ask.
Yeah. I mean, and, as we discussed earlier too, I mean, if you want to be involved, a small thing, just like retweeting something, right? Talking about the issues, or, providing links to different charities, or, discussions or whatever, that's still helping. That's still helping contribute to everything. So.
Right.
Same. Oh, sorry. You gonna say something?
Oh no, you can go ahead.
I was just gonna say, me personally, it's really hard for me to be vocal on the issue. So not that I don't want to, I have trouble expressing myself in this space. So it's really easy to express, or think about my feelings, but putting it into words, for the public is difficult for me. So that's one of the reasons why I haven't really, spoken in a whole lot. I've spoken on Twitter. I've said what I had to say. And one of the big things for me is just really just, and I know this has been said already, is just been educating myself. Even as someone who's Black myself, I find myself still not knowing enough. I find myself still feeling like, I need to do more to make people more aware. So I'm just really piggybacking off of what Sly said. You can, if you don't know what to do, really just please reach out to a friend who can relate to the situation, who can offer advice. Just please just don't sit and ignore it. Just think about it this way. If and I know it's probably hard to picture because a lot of people, in this community haven't dealt with racism. They haven't dealt with oppression historically. But if you could just imagine just what we would have to go through on a daily basis, continuously living life, being treated unequally, living life treated, a certain way just because of the skin color we have. Is nothing we can do about it. It's what Sly keeps saying. We can't turn this off, once the stream is off. So really, just put that in perspective. You have to live with the way the world is treating you. So the best thing we want to make a change. The best thing we can do is just really ask for y'all support. Just really hear us out. I've never really spoken a lot of serious issues other than mental health issues because it's something personal to myself. I mean, it's really important to me as well as Black Lives Matter. So I really like people don't hear me talk about serious issues a lot, but I'm really, saying it loud. Like, do not ignore this. It is bigger than you know. Just because you don't deal with it, just because you don't hear about it as much, does not mean the situation is over and done with.
Right. And to pull back the curtain a little bit, like we were talking about how to talk about this. Like,
yeah,
should we have a show about it? How do we have a show about it? And when I was asked at first, and I can quote myself because it's what I say in general when people talk to me about this. Hey, do you want to talk about it? No, I'd rather spontaneously combust, but we have to, right?
Yeah.
It's one of those things where Black people are not a monolith, and you're saying that you had to educate yourself. I had to educate myself because I built my life in such a way that I don't even have to think about it. I work in a place where it doesn't matter. I have friends where it doesn't matter what my race is. Like I never even have to think about it. So even though that I live it every day, it's not as visible to me until this started to happen. And even me, like I've built a wall around myself where I don't have to see it, and I had to bring that down, which takes a while, to think about what you want to say. And it's one of those things that you have to do, though. You have to allow yourself to break down those walls. If someone says to you, oh, white privilege, and you think, oh, well, I grew up poor, that's not what we're talking about. Right? And you don't know that until you actually listen to what someone's saying or look it up, don't just close off immediately. Don't build that wall immediately.
Okay.
Absolutely. All right. So before we close out for today, I want to bring this slide up here. The world sucks for a lot of people right now. It's not just the quarantine. It's not the pandemic. That's horrible for everybody, but there's a lot of groups too that have been dealing with a lot of deep-rooted issues for generations. So this month, Gamer Escape is proud to support both the Bail Project and the Trevor Project. The Bail Project is a nonprofit designed to combat mass incarceration by disrupting the money bail system. Over the next 5 years, the Bail Project will open dozens of sites in high-need jurisdictions with the goal of paying bail for tens of thousands of low-income Americans while collecting stories and data that prove that money bail is not necessary to ensure that people return to court so that those participating in the protests don't have to be incarcerated and kept from their lives and their families. The Trevor Project is the world's largest suicide prevention and crisis intervention organization for LGBTQ plus youth, young people under 25, and provides life-saving support via phone, text, and chat. I know, Rook, you have been doing a lot of fundraising for Trevor Project this past month. How has that been going? What's the update for that?
It's so good. I think last time we were saying that we just crossed 30,000. We have crossed 50,000 as a team with Rainbow Arc. So thank you to everybody who's donated. Thank you everyone for supporting, LGBTQI plus youth. It's amazing. I can't believe it. You're all so wonderful. So thank you so much for your help.
That's really awesome.
Crazy.
Nice.
Before we head out, B, is there any shout outs that you would like to give? Let people know where they can find you.
Oh, y'all can find me at twitch.tv/Beyaca, and I know y'all don't know how to spell that, so that's Beyaca. Okay, no N in my name, but no, really, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate the invite for being here.
Yeah, we appreciate you being here. It was a really good discussion.
No, thank you for sharing. Honestly, it was good to just listen and get to be a part of the discussion.
Sly.
Oh, hi, I'm Sly. You can find me on Twitch, twitch.tv/Sly, aka Great Fox. You can find me on Twitter at Sly the Fox. Yeah, I drink beer and play video games. I'm really simple, and occasionally I cook. Occasionally I cook on stream, meaning I just put food in the smoker and let it do its thing.
You got something something going on later this coming week too, don't you?
Ooh, yeah.
I'm gonna get hungry now, but that's okay.
all I can say all I can say is July 3rd, Behemoth, so Primal, Behemoth, Shirogane, Ward 2, Plot 60.
Oh,
8
Behemoth.
Yeah, boy. That's all I can say. The more formal announcement will probably be Monday or Tuesday. So just keep an eye on my Twitter. And once you see it, retweet it. You know, everybody is invited. If you're on Primal, just get here. If you're not on Primal, make it alt. We can invite you to the FC. It's gonna be a big night. Put it like this: we're trying to crash our ward.
Oh,
in a good way. In a good way. Not like seriously, in a good way. Yeah, but we're trying to crash our ward.
Mhm.
So
crashes in a good way.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
hunt
in a good
lag
way.
when you do hunts and you just lag all day.
There you go.
Like when there's just a bunch of people out in the ward, that's what
Having
we're trying
fun.
to do. Like,
Yeah.
So when our FC house fills up and like it says, hey, we can't let anybody else in, that's fine. We have a whole ward to work with. Our house is the one by the hot springs, so we got a good placement. And plus, like, we got the whole ward. So yeah, it's gonna be a really fun night. So yeah, definitely look forward to the announcement either Monday night or Tuesday proper.
Very cool.
Please
I'm looking forward to that. That'll be fun.
That was awesome. Yeah.
All right. Thank you to both B and Sly for joining us. Really great, really important talk today. I really appreciate you guys coming out for this. If you want, you can contact us, email aetheryte@gamerscape.com. You can tweet at us at Aetheryte Radio. You can also reach us as Gamerscape on Twitter, Facebook, and Discord, discord.gg/Gamerscape. We also have an Aetheryte Radio channel on there as well, where you can talk to us about the show. And that is going to do it for us for this week. Thank you very much for tuning in, everybody. And we'll see you next time.
goodbye.
Bye.
Take care.